You're right, guys, it's Turi here. Welcome to Roleplay. Once a week, I play some pen and paper RPGs with my nerdy friends, like a good little nerd. Because it's fun, it's great, there's lots of drama, and it's just a lot of fun. So, enjoy the ride. This game is a game of Dark Heresy, set in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. The history of Warhammer 40,000 is the history of our galaxy, the Milky Way. Over 20 millennia ago, men foolishly worshipped science, reason, and logic. It was a dark time. For all its failings, it however brought about two great innovations. The warp drive in Geller field that allowed ships of man to pass through the warp as a means of interstellar travel, and secondly, the navigator gene was discovered, and the mutant navigators were created to steer man's ship through the chaos of the warp. With the immaterium tamed, mankind spread across the stars. At the end of the dark age of technology, large numbers of psychers began to appear, many heralding demonic incursions. On the heels of this tragic development, the warp itself seemed to erupt in a frenzied storm, stopping all interstellar travel for thousands of years. With many worlds being completely cut off, falling into anarchy or worse, Holy Terror itself devolved into a barbarian civilization of warlords. At the end of this age of strife, the mightiest warlord rose above them all, the Emperor, the most powerful psycho who ever lived and who ever will live. Backed by mighty warriors, genetically enhanced and perfectly equipped, the Emperor united Holy Terror once again. In the 30th millennium, the warp storm seemed to reach a violent roar, suddenly ceasing, and with the warp now safe for travel, the Emperor led forth his armies of space marines across the galaxy, reconquering world after world and knitting together the Imperium of Man. The Emperor left the reclamation in the hands of his Primarchs, led by War Master Horus, and returned to Terra to construct a great work in secret which we now know to be the Golden Throne. In the 31st millennium, Horus succumbed to chaos and became corrupted, leading thousands of his Chaos Space Marines in a terrible assault on Holy Terror itself. On Horus's flagship, the Emperor himself clashed with him in single combat, becoming gravely wounded before finally obliterating his favourite son. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and a master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass, writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the Imperium for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day so that he may never truly die. Yet in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigilance. Mighty battle fleets cross the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the shining psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncounted worlds, greatest among his soldiers the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are Legion, the Imperial Guard, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name but a few. But for all the multitudes, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat from aliens, heretics, mutants, and worse. To be a man in such times is to be one among untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. Forget the power of technology, of science, and for so much to have been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim darkness of the future, there is only war. There is no peace among the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of the thirsting gods. Prepare to enter the nightmare that is the world of dark heresy.
Good, wonderful. So here's a little recap of what happened in the last chapter. Um, First of all, you were an acolyte group, most of you, or maybe now I should say the minority of you that
Yes.
remains, was an acolyte group of Inquisitor Renault, who sent you to Wahidi because a civil unrest had broken out because the people declared someone a saint, and said saint was rumored to be killed, and that had to be investigated by the Inquisition. As you arrived there, you had a local contact named Turi Daris, and she gave you more information on the situation that had developed in the meantime while you traveled there. That said saint was rumored to have reincarnated and led the people into a rebellion. Lots of rebels sort of fled into the jungle area around the colony, small colony of about 60,000 faithful Imperials that, set up there. The whole place was very, new and backwater for the Emperor. There was no tea to be had anywhere, which was a big detriment for Icarus Lamont, a noble born then Psyker, who was there to assist the group. The other members of the group was a sister of battle in training named Catherine, an Imperial guardsman named Oscar, and one of the two who still survive to this day, as well as a knight from a feudal world named Sir Leonard. These four initially set out and explored around the city, gathering clues, meeting with the inhabitants, investigating sites, routing out rebels, getting into all sorts of shenanigans, until it became clear that their best lead was a bishop who had set out to a faraway chapel and not returned, and between him and the city were lots of rebels. So they assumed or concluded that if they were following the bishop, they might become aware to whether or not he was involved in the rebel thing. For that, they also, got themselves a ship, shippered up northward, together with two other companions, one of which was a man named Charles Anderson, who was very much interested in getting out there and investigating some ruins of sorts that he meant that should have been out there. He also, was a very good in navigating, so it was good to have him around on that ship journey to know when you've gotten too far, too close. The other person was a far more peculiar young woman named Tina, and she didn't really do or say much about where she was from or what she was doing there, but she seemed to have a particular liking to Oscar and wanting to follow him around wherever he went. On that journey, there were a lot of little adventures to be had, and the acolyte group found a abandoned factory where the rebels had camped out, at least a big portion of them. Unfortunately for them, Charles Anderson had been wounded and they needed to get medical treatment anyway, and the rebels helped out with that, not knowing that these were Inquisitor agents sent to at least track them down and possibly pacify them. Now, the agents, of course, weren't so much interested in whether or not the rebels or the government forces won this engagement. It was more about what was behind that. This holy daughter that the rebels worshipped so much, or some said our holy sister, especially the younger generation. They met an old man named, what was his name? Leo, I believe. Similar to Sir Leonard, but not quite so surly. He had been working on the plant for how many years? He told him all about the terrible working conditions and how the youth didn't see much of a future. before they could get into more hijinks, Icarus Lamont actually managed to arrange himself a meeting with the leader of the rebels in a different camp. That would require them to take a long train ride, at least half a day. Before that, though, the next morning, a different kind of shipment arrived. A group that was known to them as the Tempest Crew, Tempest Company, brought in weapons, probably from off-world. A peculiar bunch they were, none of them ever showing their faces, most of them having masks on. Their leader, a very smiling red devil mask in particular. And they brought in weapons and ammunitions that were far superior to what any guardsman would have ever had equipment to. The bullets themselves spitting with fire out of their muzzles. And they also brought walking machines that could be manned by a person to walk upon the battlefield. Sir Leonard even was hired for a short time, because he seemed to fit in, and he was sort of infiltrating them, I'm assuming.
Totally.
Yes, totally. You also saw a very never since seen machinery. It seemed like a big metal horse, he described it in his medieval understanding of the Empire. They arrived via train at the big main rebel camp, where about 1,000 rebels in total just had gathered up for what they were assuming to be their glorious victory and re-establishment of the worship of the Holy Daughter over at the Wahidi colony. The plan didn't quite work out, thanks to an intervention by Icarus Lamont, who had gotten in contact with another Inquisitory agent sent by Inquisitor Renault to have a little bit of watch on his quickly newly assembled team. His name was Lazarus. And Icarus and Lazarus witnessed how Icarus essentially detonated the rebel command tent, killing everyone inside with the powers of the warp that he unleashed. In the ensuing struggle, Lazarus nearly managed to kill Icarus as well.
Yes, totally.
With their leadership, reduced, let's say, the beheaded, if you so say, or blown up, the rebels were further disorganized by Oscar getting to town on them, using his sniper training to pick some crucial members, mostly the head of the medical staff and the head of the armory off, so that the next day when the rebels were gathering for what was essentially their big charge, there was a bit of more chaos. And it would not have been without the rallying cry of the bishop emerging from the crowd that rallied them up behind their belief and their faith into the Holy Daughter, that they probably would have not been able to make such a unified push. And all was given to them by a sign from above, a falling comet landing on Wahidi. None of them knew that this wasn't an ordinary comet. It was some form of drop pod, or maybe a drop podified shuttle, delivering onto the ground a administratum worker with a rattled up memory named Amendez Bellum. This only added to all the unusual occurrences appearing on Wahidi, mostly noticed by Icarus Lamont, although he consistently fails to actually perceive the true origin of said unnatural occurrences, mostly natural being the unusual appearances of moonlight shedding upon the scenery wherever he went, as well as the here and there malfunctioning of his psychic powers, resulting on some electric discharges here and some ghostly voices there. Now, while everyone, the rebels, the acolytes, the landed administratum worker, made their way to Wahidi, a new threat seemed to emerge there, as Amendez came in contact with a person that she was carrying messages for, a midnight blue stranger who led and forced her into the local administratum building, where they did some sabotage or maybe some information adding to the database. Later, Amendez finished that all up, but it remains curious what was the truth, the information they added or the information they had overwritten. As the rebels pushed onto the city in their full might and upgraded armaments, they managed to take about half the city, where a big river separated the loyalist Imperial Guardsmen on the south and the rebels on the north side. A lot of factions all vied over the city in their own way. There was the local industrial magnate, namely mostly known for his call sign, the Bass. And of course the Inquisition and the Imperial Guards and the group of Sisters of Battle, who were able to protect the church for many days until they had to retreat from it. The governor, who were brought to safety. All in all, it was a great chaos, which was only resolved as there was a big showdown at the Imperial Palace, where the Midnight Blue Stranger and his accomplice, a black-clad knight who seemed to had a particular grievance with Sir Leonard to duel out, resulted in them putting down those two menaces. The Midnight Blue Stranger mutating before their eyes into a magnificent, huge bug creature who took many pistol shots from the Rodeon Oscar and the combined effort of a young Adeptus Sororitas in training who slit the beast's belly to bring it down. Yes, the beast did manage to throw him off despite its best efforts.
See, I told you it was all me, guys. All me.
Oh yes, Icarus at that point was no longer with them, as was Lazarus, who seemed to be the target of a particularly maleficent demon, using Icarus to get to Lazarus and claim what the demon thought rightfully his. The two of them were burned to ashes and sent back to the Immaterium, revealing something most peculiar about Oscar. Yes, the demon did manage to kill Lazarus, but Oscar, with a certain artifact sword in hand and a inert power to banish this demon, though none of them could explain how, would manage to throw him back to where he came from. Yeah, he never used the sword, though. This particular weapon did cause some peculiarity, and he was wise enough not to tamper with forces he did not understand. Though he would have really wished for a Astartes pattern bolt rifle. Bolter. Yeah. Though all the crates, were either empty or containing this one particular sword. which he still laments to this day. Did he? We'll find out if he had some better luck getting his hands on one in the future. Maybe it is in his future. With those fiends slain, I might say, they managed to get in contact with the Inquisition, holding the government palace against a rebel assault, which was spearheaded or fled by another companion of them that should have joined them, namely Hanette Fausta, a psyker who was escorting the Imperial Guard here on the planet. The commissar who had a watchful eye over her had met a short accident by the Inquisition earlier. So all in all, Hanette Fausta, with her regiment being wiped by one of the deadly machines who could spew ammunition far faster than anybody could dodge, managed to group up with them and valiantly hold off the onslaught of the rebels. A lot of and 3 lighter frigates arrived over the planet. They had managed to work it out, though. One might say mostly because the rebels and Imperial Guardsmen ran out of ammunition. But that, of course, would none of the factions admit openly. And cooler heads did prevail. Telephone. Yeah, no problem. And most of them were already embroiled in peace talks. Things were being worked out. What did happen, though, was that the boss, in an escape attempt, was shot by the true aim of Oscar. We don't know if he was actually being escorted away by another faction entirely, or if this was his doing. Turi Darius seemed to have fled as well the scene. At the moment, they lost contact. Also, they lost contact to Charles Anderson and Catherine, who Catherine demanded to follow up on the chapel up in the mountains and to see what the bishop worked to. Though the bishop at that time would not have been found there, as Sir Leonard, after the rousing speech that the bishop gave days earlier, would have followed him and murdered the old man in cold blood, because he perceived no heretic should live.
It was for the Emperor!
Yes. And there was a right-hand man to the boss who ordered the boss to be taken out of custody. His rescue team did not make it, though. Yeah, his name was Aldec Basti. Who knows if we'll hear more from him. As it stands right now, though, we return our story to the future, or for perhaps to the here and now, as we are still over Wahidi with the Imperial fleet. The Inquisitor who took them under was named Inquisitor Lene, a woman with a intimidating and very influential appearance. She gave all those who had fought against the Bug Beast, the mysterious Midnight Blue Stranger, and the Black Knight a choice: join the Inquisition or return to your life back on Wahidi. Now, the young sister of battle named Hana Mizushima did take the offer up to return to Wahidi with her sisters, and most of the guardsmen did as well, although some joined them. Hanette and Amendez did choose to join the Inquisition as well, though it was revealed that this was an illusion, for the Inquisition would never let someone live who had been in contact with Heresy. The shuttle was shot down on their way to the planet. leaving only 4 to truly know what happened there on Wahidi. Namely Oscar, Sir Leonard, Hanette, and Amendez. And we skip a few days. We see the inquisitorial quarters. The Inquisitor usually wearing some, at least on this occasion, a very baroque dress. She has black hair with purple dyed strands on the end. She has brightly blue eyes, light bright blue eyes, and a minion of hers comes to give her the news. Inquisitor, we have yet not found the rogue agent Turi Darius. Also, the other acolyte under the Inquisitor Renault, Sister Catherine, has not been found yet, though we have evidence that she has been joined with a man named Charles Anderson. This name results in an immediate reaction by the Inquisitor. She slams her fists down on the table, making a little quill fly off to the side. And she says, "You tell me that they down on Wahidi have a sector-renowned archaeotechnologist who is on the loose and not found yet." The minion quivers and backs off a little, and she barks at him, "Find him! He does not need to make any more expeditions here on Wahidi." And with that, the minion departs, and the Inquisitor calms herself down. She takes a wine glass and sways it gently for a few moments, thinking of drinking it, and then puts it down and says to herself, "Well, it won't matter much. We already have our greatest prize." And she takes up a big casket. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Anderson is the archaeotechnologist, which is, well, you don't know what that group kind of does. So you knew he was all about going out there and finding ancient ruins, though. And she puts a big box, a suitcase, you might say, onto the table and opens it up. And within is that one sword that Oscar handed to her to be taken care of. Unfortunately, she closes it again and says, "Captain von Heppel," as she presses a Voxcom, "set course for the closest trade port. I have a priority delivery headed for Tarkus 5. And with that, the scene ends. Now, we're going to see what everyone here has been up to. Let's start with Sir Leonard. What has your character been doing in the days and weeks and months that followed?
Well, he has, of course, keep training. He always needs to stay in shape.
Yes,
And
indeed.
then he have done some small work for the Lady Inquisitor.
And what did that work entail?
That work didn't tell.
It did entail that you were sent out with other acolyte groups, namely to mostly test weapons. Wasn't that right?
That was right.
Yes, you tested all sorts of weapons, some even cutting edge, and it is a bit of a pun because some of these weapons were forged in strange ways, others were inlaid with technology that you didn't quite understand, swords, hammers, axes, some even that which would not classify as any of those three. And you, of course, being very handy with melee weapons, got to handle those, while others handled more exotic ranged weapons. You were set out to deal with a set of mostly demon cults.
Yes.
Yes. What else did you do while, the weeks and months went by? We're not going quite chronological order here, as everyone was busy.
And then he have taken lessons about psychers from the Inquisitor herself.
Yes, indeed. How was she comparing psychers? What practical image did she give?
They're all bad.
Yes, she said psychers were all bad, and she compared them to lit candles. A psyker is like a lit candle. It could set a whole room on fire if handled improperly. That's why psychers were put into sockets. They were bound to the Emperor. That gave them hold. That gave them stability. And what was, Sir Leonard, the biggest danger then to a psyker?
That was...
Don't make me make him roll an intelligence check to remember.
Sir Leonard's pop quiz, yeah.
Actually, let's practice that. Let's roll.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
The greatest danger to a psyker was the unknownly, the surprise. Did you say?
Exactly. Do roll me your knowledge in psychers, actually, which is intelligence plus 10.
Oh God.
Since that is now what you've been tutored of.
It's going to be so... Oh, no.
No. Okay, you don't quite remember, but you do remember that the Inquisitor swiped the candle off the table. And you replied, "We kill it?" To her, what is the greatest danger to Psyker? We kill it?
Yeah.
No, Sir Leonard, of course, the greatest danger to a Psyker are the people and the forces around him. Speaking of which, upon your weapon trials, there was an observer sent along with them. And that observer was blind, which is curious for an observer, but he was, particular since you dealt with demonic cults, there to observe something quite different. Particularly the effect those weapons had on those tainted with chaos. This man's name is Carm. Do introduce yourself.